Democratic Party, the majority party. It was so simple, or seemed that way. There were more Democrats than Republicans, therefore, there were more Democratic presidents than Republican presidents. It was so for years, until 1968, and only one since then. It is possible the Democratic Party has never recovered from what happened in 1968. It is possible. To understand the party now, you have to see it then. The Democrats were in power, but the country was in trouble over the war in Vietnam, and so the party was in trouble. Correspondent John Hart reports from Chicago, where in 1968, the Democrats held a convention.
In the week before the convention, 300 Americans were killed in Vietnam, a typical week that year. In the 4 months before, Robert Kennedy was murdered. Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. 125 cities had riots, including this one, where the mayor scolded his police for going too easy. Many young people were saying the system didn't work, and when 10,000 of them came here to demonstrate that, and some of them put a Vietnamese communist flag on the statue of a Civil War hero, the mayor's police did not go easy. A federal investigation later concluded there had been provocations from the demonstrators, rocks, bottles, and other things thrown at police, but that the response was, in the words of the report, unrestrained and indiscriminate police violence. It was as if the normal restraints on human behavior, having been lifted in Vietnam, were slipping dangerously in this country as well. The violence of the war which divided the country was echoed by violence in the streets which divided the country further. Anti-war delegates were harassed on the floor.
What are you trying to strong-arm stuff? He's an elected delegate.
This is John Chancellor on the floor. I'm looking down at Edwin Newman in the middle of a huge bunch of security people. How did it get started? Do you know?
They keep coming around all day checking our credentials. And it's time they stop. There is nothing in the rules of the Democratic Party that says they have a right to check us every 10 minutes. They have harassed us an entire day.
The Chicago police are now in the aisles here with billy clubs, clearing people out. They're not using them on people, they're carrying them, and they're dragging everybody right out of the aisle here. It's a terrific crush. About 6 policemen came in here, some of them wearing the blue helmets of the Chicago Police Force, and they are dragging out of here the people who were involved in this. One delegate from New York who objected to having his credentials checked.
This surely is the first time that policemen have ever entered a convention, the floor of a convention.
In the United States.
Colorado. Mr. Chairman, Colorado rises to a point of information. Is there any rule under which Mayor Daley can be compelled to suspend the police state terror perpetrated this minute on kids in front of the Conrad Hilton?
By the night of the presidential nominations, the National Guard backed up the police to keep streets clear of demonstrators. The guards used tear gas, but the police used nightsticks.
George McGovern is President of the United States, we wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
What are we coming to as a society? What are we coming to as a country? If policemen are treated the way they have been treated, not only in Chicago, but all over the country, on the grounds that the confrontation has to be made because we got to get the action. We got to get the violence.
It would have been impossible to hold the Democratic National Convention in any city in the United States or throughout the world without demonstrations or disruption. Daley's right on this point. Chicago just happened to be the city. It would have been impossible to hold it anywhere because the Democratic Party has blood on its hands.
By the time Vice President Humphrey won the nomination, it was a broken prize, which his co-chairman Walter Mondale could only try to restore.
The vice president was a candidate along with the rest. We were dealt with the same as they were, and we won, I think, in a convention which is as fair as any's ever been.
The establishment kept its power and lost the election. The outsiders were left with symbolic gestures, nominating a young black from Georgia for vice president, Julian Bond, who had become a symbol of the rebellion.
Fellow delegates, the people of America are watching us now, as indeed the whole world is watching us.
1968 was a struggle between the ins and the outs left Chicago determined to take power. They did, and some of those who were bloodied in the streets then are delegates in San Francisco now. The outsiders of 68 nominated George McGovern 4 years later, and he lost. They changed the party rules and elected Carter, and he disappointed. And now the two wings are being asked to join together behind Mondale and Ferraro and seek, at last, recovery from what happened here a generation ago.